The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force now says that most women in their 40s should not get routine mammograms. Now, as you know, that flies in the face of what women have been told for years now, and the new guidelines are being challenged by a number of groups, including the American Cancer Society. A woman came up to me on the street today angry, confused about what to do. A lot of people are wondering, is this some kind of excuse that insurance companies are now going to be using to deny paying for mammograms for women in their 40s? So we want to try to clear up the confusion tonight, dig deeper, and get the facts. Joining us now is Dr. Kimberly Gregory, who's a member of the task force that issued the new guidelines, and Dr. Danielle Copans, who's a professor of radiology at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Copans, you say these new guidelines are outrageous. Why?
Well, to begin with, Anderson, just to tell you my credentials, I'm also one of the world's leading experts on mammography screening. The credentials are outrageous. The task force guidelines are outrageous because they admit that there's a decrease in cancer deaths when you screen women in their 40s, but then they go ahead and tell women that we don't think you should be screened.
So why do you think they're doing that?
You have to ask them. I can't interpret what their motivation is. They claim scientific evidence. The scientific evidence, as they admit, clearly shows that you decrease deaths from breast cancer if you begin screening at age 40. One of the concerns that I have in the way they analyze the data, where instead of looking at direct data that show what happens when you introduce screening into the population, in the United States, the death rate from breast cancer has decreased by 30% since we introduced mammography screening in the mid-1980s. The task force acknowledges that actually the maximum benefit was seen in women in their 40s, and yet they then go ahead and use computer models and ignore direct data from the United States and from Sweden and the Netherlands.
Dr. Gregory, you're on the task force. How do you respond? I mean, the fact that many major cancer organizations, American Cancer Society, Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, the Komen Foundation, have come out strongly against your panel's recommendations. Are they wrong?
What we're recommending is we're not recommending against mammography in this age group. What we're saying is we're recommending against routine screening in this age group, and that the net benefit is small and that there are some harms.
Well, what does that mean? So a 40-year-old woman, should she get a mammogram, in your opinion, Dr. Gregory?
I think she should talk to her doctor about her individual risks and what her personal issues are, and they should make a decision together.
Dr. Gregory, what does that sound like to you?
And Anderson, one of the problems is that no one on the task force has any experience in mammography screening. The benefits from mammography come from screening. They don't come from waiting until a woman has a lump and then you use mammograms. The task force said they did a scientific analysis. We just heard that they suggested maybe women who are at high risk should be screened. There's no scientific evidence that screening women at high risk will save any lives. None of the randomized control trials divided women up based on risk. So there's no science to support that recommendation. Furthermore, if you only screen based on increased risk, you'll miss the vast majority of cancers. 75 to 90% of women who develop breast cancer are not at increased risk. So the guidelines just don't make any sense.
Dr. Gregory, why wasn't there somebody who's a cancer specialist on the panel? And also, I mean, I read the recommendation, and it seemed to me like the biggest thing you guys were coming up with for why there shouldn't be routine screenings is that it causes anxiety. And that seems like kind of minor.
We're actually recommending, it's a grade B recommendation for routine screening in women between 50 and 75, and a grade C between 40 and 49.
Anderson, there are absolutely no data to show that anything changes at the age of 50. These recommendations have no basis in science. If you look at the data when mammography screening is directly introduced into the population and not use the computer models that these folks relied on, there's a 40% decrease in deaths when you screen women in their 40s.
Dr. Gregory?
It's outrageous to say they shouldn't be screened.
The body of evidence was based on randomized controlled trials, and we know for a fact that the incidence of breast cancer goes up after age 40. So the net benefit and the magnitude of the benefit at age 50. So the magnitude of the benefits is easily appreciated at age 50 and above, and
Dr. Gregory, doesn't it? I mean, if it catches some women who otherwise it wouldn't catch, I mean, isn't it a benefit? I mean, if it saves a handful of women's lives, isn't it still a good thing?
Well, but there's a significant number of women who will experience false positive tests and undergo additional tests and biopsies and some complications, so there are some harms.
Anderson, we're not talking about a small benefit here. We're talking about a reduction in deaths of 40%. Prior to 1990, the death rate from breast cancer was unchanged for 50 years in the United States. Mammography screening began in the mid-1980s, and soon after, the death rate began to fall. The task force admits on page 720, if you want to go look it up, that the benefit was high, that the decrease in deaths that we've seen in the United States is highest among women in their 40s. Data in Sweden and the Netherlands confirm that. Women should be screened beginning at age 40.
Dr. Gregory, a lot of folks I've talked to today who literally came up to me on the street concerned about this feel that maybe now insurance companies are going to use your recommendations to not pay for screening for women in their 40s. Are you concerned about that at all?
That's beyond the scope of what our recommendations are involved. We do not make recommendations for insurance coverage.
You know, that's just ignoring what the fallout is going to be. What your guidelines are suggesting is that women in their 40s will not get to be screened unless they pay for it themselves. And that means poor women won't be screened and they won't benefit from mortality reduction.
We got to go, but just bottom line from both of you. Dr. Gregory, a 40-year-old woman sitting in our audience tonight watching, would you recommend she get screened, get a mammogram?
I think that she should talk to her doctor and talk about her individual risks and what her concerns are, and they should make a decision for her.
And Dr.
Copenz?
Individualized.
Yeah, I completely agree that we should all be talking about these issues and women should talk to their doctors, but they should be allowed to make the decision. The task force supports informed decision making, and they've already decided they're taking the ability to make the decision away from women in their 40s. The American Cancer Society guidelines, I think, are the wisest guidelines.
All right. Dr. Gregory, I appreciate your time tonight, and Dr. Copenz as well. By the way, there's more information at ac360.com about breast cancer and mortality rates by age.